All right, and finally number 12, the false choice flaw. Now I want to talk a little bit about circular reasoning, because circular reasoning was number 12 in fierce logic, and I'll tell you a little about the reason for that and the reason I've taken it out. Several years ago when I wrote Fierce Logic, circular reasoning didn't appear on the test. It never has appeared with any sort of regularity as an actual flaw on the test. But it used to pop up as a bad answer choice an awful lot. So you'd have answer choices, and we talked about flaw answer choices, and a certain group of them named types of flaws. And you'd have answer choices that would identify the circular reasoning as a flaw. And it never happened. I mean, it was almost always wrong. But it happened often enough as a bad answer choice that I thought you needed to know what circular reasoning looked like. Well, over the last 4, 5, 6 years really, at least the last 3 or 4 or 5, it hasn't popped up as an answer choice even very often. So I really think it's time to just move that off the list, and in its place I'm going to add the false choice flaw. The false choice is the assumption that there's only one option left, basically. So what will happen is you will have an argument that will set up options and will conclude that there's only one avenue left after eliminating 1 or 2 other options. And that's fine to do. The problem is if you don't know from the beginning how many total options there are, then you cannot determine that only one option remains simply by eliminating some others. Let me give you an example. I've got to go to Boston next weekend for this conference, and I can't fly. I can't be that close to other people. I'm really uncomfortable with that whole thing, so I can't fly. And it's too far to walk to Boston for the weekend. I can't walk there. So I guess I'm going to have to ride a burro. And this is false choice. And I want you to notice that it's pretty obvious here that I haven't ruled out all the possibilities. But no matter how many possibilities I rule out, it will still be a false choice to decide that there's only one left if I haven't listed all of the possible options. If I haven't determined that I've listed all the possible options. So I could say, I got to go to Boston, I can't fly because, other people, and I can't walk, it's too far, and I can't drive, and I don't own a car, and none of my friends will drive me, and I can't take a bus, and there's no train service, and I can't take a taxi, therefore I'm going to have to rent a burro. Now, see, that argument may have seemed a little better because I went through a pretty good list of the traditional travel options from here to Boston, but it's no better than the first argument, logically speaking, because unless I know how many options there are, it doesn't matter how many options I eliminate, I can't determine that there's only one remaining. So anytime you get an argument that eliminates some choice and decides that there's only one choice left, immediately you begin to think of that false choice. Wait a minute, did they give me all the options? And the likelihood is that no, you've not been presented with all of the options. And these are they. The Big 12, the Dirty Dozen, the ascriptive error, the assumption that the evidence matters, the prescriptive flaw, the assumption that the prescription works, the causal flaw, the assumption that there was no other cause, the analogy flaw, the assumption that the two things are analogous, the part to whole flaw, the assumption that what's true of the parts are true of the whole. And by the way, while I'm here, this is a part of analogy flaw, right? It's the assumption that the parts are like the whole. Another one of those that doesn't occur quite as frequently is the past to present flaw, that Janine has failed every math test this semester, therefore we can be sure that she's going to fail the final. Just because something has happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to continue that way in the present. That's a version of the analogy flaw that you might see. Sampling flaw, the assumption that the sample is representative, that we know that it looks like the larger population and that we know that it looked like the larger population before the study started. Statistics. The statistical flaw is the assumption that a percentage means the same thing as a raw number, as a real number. Necessary versus sufficient, the assumption that a necessary condition means the same thing as a sufficient condition, that what is necessary is sufficient, or vice versa, that what is enough to bring about a result is necessary to bring about that result, and those aren't necessarily true. You can't assume it. Equivocation error, the assumption that that a same word can mean two different things in the course of an argument. The ad hominem error, it's the assumption that an argument is the person making it, and it's not true. You can't attack an argument by attacking the person making it. You can't support an argument by defending the person making it. The absence of evidence, the assumption that if a thing hasn't been proven false, that it is therefore true. And just because you haven't proven that it's false doesn't mean that it's true. It might still be false. And the false choice flaw, the assumption that all of the options have been accounted for when you've only eliminated some options. In order to make a correct choice, a true choice, you have to know how many ways there are of doing a thing and then eliminate them. And those are our major flaw types. And now we will move on to talk about our resolution questions and our principle and proposition questions. Now come up next.